Fans, welcome once again to another edition of the Old School Shooters podcast. We are very, very lucky this afternoon or this evening to have the legend that is a true legend. That term gets thrown around quite a bit, but in this case, we absolutely have a legend in the form of Mr. Gerald Brisco, WWE Hall of Famer, along with a number of accomplishments that we'll probably get into. In addition to Jerry, we have, I must say, the King of Connecticut is looking absolutely. Another term that I throw around for the King a lot is resplendent, but definitely tonight we're looking very Sinatra-esque. And what is with that fine jacket, King?
Well, my beautiful woman, Gloria Differente, and I, my beautiful Venezuelan, we're about to go to Larry Mazza's supper club tonight in down in Merritt Island in the Cocoa Beach area, and I'm already dressed for the occasion, sipping on a martini. And I got this jacket back in September when I was in Sicily. I've got my villa there in Schiacca. Beautiful. I mean, I wish the fans would be able to see it. I wish these plebeians would be able to see the beauty and splendor of Schiacca and Palermo, where I bought this jacket. Last night we had Phil Baroni and I on, and he's going to be going with me in March back to the island of Sicilia, the island of both of our ancestors, our grandparents. So beautiful. But as a world traveler, you know me, Jack. I always wear the finest outfits from all around the world. But I'm very excited to have my friend Mr. Brisco on, a true legend, as you stated.
Well, King, wow! I thought it was only the finest for me. Now you dinner date with your lovely missus there, so I'll forgive you for that because we all have to dress up occasionally. But wow! I'm on a King show. Nothing better than being here with royalty. So, man, you're talking about a subject near and dear to my family and my family's name and all this. It kind of ties in. So, man, I'm honored to be on here, and I'm ready to grow.
That's tremendous. The custom on the Old School Shooters podcast, Jerry, is we're delving into as the title suggests, the theme of old school and what that means to each guest. And no one is more qualified in terms of your history and accomplishments to address what old school means. So if you could enlighten our fans as to what that concept means to you, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Wow, it means I'm old. For one thing, I've been around, I've seen a lot. I really came along. I'd like to tell people I was really fortunate at the time that I came along. I came along and my brother started in the business in the mid 60s. I was a fan, in the early 60s, growing up as a kid when TV was first getting hot. We didn't have a lot of TVs around my hometown of Bow Legs, Oklahoma, so we kind of congregated wherever that TV was, and neighbors, made some money. They had a TV, so everybody would go over there. We'd watch the old black and white rabbit ears. We were lucky we'd get Dallas wrestling if you're holding the antenna just right. Old Fritz Von Erich and Waldo and all those villains down there. And then if you held an antenna the other way, you get Oklahoma City wrestling. And then every once in a while, St. Louis wrestling would blow in on one of those damn northern winds down through the Oklahoma plains there. We get that. So I grew up watching some of the old school guys, Bill Longston, some of those names, the T-shirt, George Gordy Hinkle. I'm wearing his T-shirt right now. One of my guys that I always kind of was really fascinated by George and his unique style of grappling and catch wrestling. But a lot of those guys, I saw come along, and the guy I worked for, Leroy McGurk, was an NCAA champion back in the 40s at Oklahoma A&M College, where my brother and I both went to school at Oklahoma State. And so Leroy knew a lot of those old timers and would bring them through. And a unique thing about Leroy McGurk, he was blind. But he remembered all these guys when he was young and had his eyesight. So these old guys would come in, and man, it was a wealth of knowledge. And these old guys were wanting to share that knowledge. And here I was, a kid coming out of college, my brother coming out of college, and some type of reputation. So those old timers kind of migrated towards me and my brother, and was willing to share their knowledge and show us a few of those old hook and hold and old hold back from the past there, you know. And you know, the Ports, Jeff Ports, there was Gordy Nelson. There were so many of those guys that, you know, they're not really big name, but yet, you know, in our world, they're famous, you know. And so I had the privilege of meeting a lot of those guys along the way, and absorbing some of their knowledge. So I just felt like I came along at the perfect time in the business, right before it was really transforming from the old Carney days into, you know, the midterms, I guess you could say, and before it hit to the sports entertainment genre. But yeah, I got to see and meet a lot of those old timers.
Yeah, and I can relate to Jerry, you know, in that regard, because I stumbled into the wild and wacky world of professional wrestling, from amateur wrestling and high school and collegiate wrestling, and also judo. Because back in the early 90s, when I came out of college, judo was really big for wrestlers. Historical note on judo: back then we could attack the legs from a standing position. So we wrestlers really dominated in the sport of judo. Dan Severn won a national championship in judo without even being belted, and they put a black belt on him. So some historical reference there. But my buddy Dave was on the indie scene in pro wrestling then. He brought me in, and then I met my mentor when I was competing in grappling and mixed martial arts. I met one of my mentors, a man that was like a second father to me, was Billy Wicks. And the funny story there was, he saw me riding a guy. Billy used to have a school in the Carolinas, Western North Carolina, back in the mid 2000s. And I was out there when I was regional manager for a group of breweries. Whenever I was in Nashville, I was always looking for places where I could train. And I went and trained out there. And he saw me riding this kid, and I was kind of doing what we used to call dirty wrestling, you know, where I was sticking the old sharp bone in the eye socket. And he came over to me and he said, "Man, where'd you learn all that stuff?" And I said, "I just learned it wrestling, you know, dirty wrestling." And we became fast friends, and he was one of my best friends, you know, right up until his death. And I learned so much from him. And also he introduced me to Frankie Kane and had me go to stay with Frankie back in the day when I was competing in MMA. And I tell people, you know, if you study the roots of combat sports and the roots of professional wrestling and mixed martial arts, we've talked about it a lot here. That's what this show is about. Old school shooters. They're the same roots, and MMA really came out of professional wrestling. So I can really relate to what Jerry's saying there. Pro wrestling is got such a strong, rich shoot history that really a lot of the fans today, unfortunately, don't know.
And that's a shame, you know. And you know, every generation has its stars. I mean, you know, 50 years from now, you know, our school, our mentors will be totally forgotten, and there'll be new guys that come along. And I'm not really happy about that, but it's just the way evolution goes. But some of those Billy Wicks, I mean, Billy, wow, he was renowned guy in the South, you know, and all over the country for his work and his shooting. I had the opportunity to meet Billy. Like you said, he had to go up in Western Carolina, and we'd run shows up there. Billy would always show up. And King, as you know, when you have a little background, these guys they kind of migrate to you. So it was like a friendship that spun up. And I'm glad you mentioned Frankie Kane, because Frankie's another guy I met when I was very first getting into the business out in Oklahoma. Before he was the great Mephisto, it's just Frankie Lane. And he'd come out there, and he and I would ride together, and I just flip a switch and turn him on and just keep my mouth shut for the 300-mile trip, and just so much enjoyed it. But like I said, all these guys were really top class performers that you don't hear a lot about. And fortunately, with YouTube out there, there's not a lot of it because of the way the business was handled with its taping and stuff like that, reusing the tape. But there's not a lot of them. But if you find any Billy Wicks or Frankie Kane or Great Mephisto or any of those guys we talk about, or you guys talk about on this show, you're doing yourself a favor by turning it, because there's more than one style out there. And those guys who mastered more than one style are usually your stars of tomorrow.
Yeah, I had the opportunity long time ago. This was 2007, maybe, of doing a DVD that I put together with Pops, with Billy Wicks and Frankie Kane, called The Tale of Two Carnies. And they told their stories about coming up in the carnies and coming up in the – Frankie used to do the smokers fights. And there's a great book. Was that Scott Teal? I think that was Scott Teal that wrote. He said whoever wrote it sent me the book, and I think it was Scott Teal that wrote the book, Frankie's book. And Frankie's featured in the Rough and Tumble book I wrote with Eric Paulson. And I think I gave you a copy of that over the years, Jerry. I can't remember, but that was Eric Paulson was Brock Lesnar's coach in MMA, world Shuto champion, and really a renowned coach, but he always respected the true lineage of professional wrestling. And we put together a great book that Gene LaBelle and Pops did Billy Wicks did the forwards to. And if I didn't send you that, I'll give it to you here in Florida or ship it to you. But yeah, man, I mean that's such a rich history. And that was really why I had the idea really of doing this show originally that Jack's hosting here, because I want to give people an appreciation for the true history of professional wrestling.
Yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned our friend out in L.A., LaBelle. What a historical guy he is. I mean, Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, Van Dam, or whatever the name of the guy is. I want to say Rob Van Dam every time I say that name for some reason, because I'm good friends with Rob. But yeah, that Van Dam, all those guys he was intertwined in with the Hollywood aspect to it. So not only did our roots of our business spawn, a lot of great in ring competitors, but it also helped spawn a lot of martial art movie stars and entertainment stars, which I think is a fantastic part and really unique part of our business also.
Yeah, number one action star in the world, The Rock, no doubt.
Well,
so Jerry, circling back to your pro wrestling career, in addition to your numerous singles titles, you had quite a successful and expansive run with your brother Jack as a tag team. And I've got a two-part question here. As a kid growing up, I was a huge fan of Jim Crockett Promotions and tag team wrestling in general. It's actually what attracted me to the business. So my first part of this part A question is, do you have a particularly favorite match or moment? Was it being on the first Starrcade against Steamboat and Youngblood, or another one? And why do you think that tag team wrestling appeared to peak in the 80s, et cetera, into the early 90s, and now seems to be, when it's available or when it's on the card, lower and not in the prominent position that it once was, given the entertainment value for the fans?
Yeah. Okay, a great question, a great three-part question there. Favorite matches, I mean, first of all, Jack and I were really unique. When we set out in this business, we didn't set out to become a tag team. He set out to become heavyweight world champion, and I wanted Danny Hodge. I wanted to be world junior heavyweight champion. Little did I know the money difference in the two, or about had different goals. So we decided at an early age in our business, hey, you go your spot, you do what you need to do. I'll go my spot, and I'll do what I need to do, and when needed, we'll have two places that way. I can come down here, and he could go up there. So we kind of planned that out where we'd have actually two home bases, which I thought was pretty good. And so we both went. It became single star, and fortunately, just at the right time in our business, there was another brother tag team that happened to come along, Dory and Terry Funk. back in those days, there weren't a lot of true brothers, that were tag teamed. And here you had 4 guys. All 4 of them were collegiate athletes. All 4 of them were in their starting out in their prime. And one was set from Texas being Cowboys, the other set from Oklahoma being Indians. So you had all the natural ingredients of professional rivalry right there. And so when we started that feud with the Funks, Terry and Dory weren't really a tag team, but they're known as a tag team too. But and all of a sudden we're tag teaming against this whole. Then we become a tag team. So we worked several different angles, but jumping to the Carolinas where we're a full set tag team. Now we did something up there that's kind of lost anymore. We made something really unique out of our challenge to Ricky and Jay. We declared ourselves as old timers. We've had every title there. We won it all. We're older. You guys are the new generation. You guys are the new kids on. But you guys have something that we've never ever had, and that's that World Tag Team Championship belt. And strange as it may seem, we had in the United States with North America, we had every type of tag team championship you could have except for World Tag Team. So what we were saying was the truth. And, hey, we wanted this. And if we win, we'll probably retire and just take it back down to Florida and grow oranges the rest of our life and fix cars. And so we made that belt as the primary focus of the 2 old timers that were basically jealous of these 2 young kid stars that are coming along. And we made that belt be the main focus of it. So that entire angle to me was a very unique angle. But we made the title the main focus of the thing. Where nowadays you don't even know what the title they're going for if they're ever is a tag team. So yeah, it was unique. But favorite. I mean, you got the Funk brothers, you got Ricky and Jay, which was their heel turn. But we'd done a slight heel turn before that. We'd done down here Mike Graham and Steve Kern here in Florida, just kind of testing waters. Coach, we're 2 babyface teams, and you kind of run through everybody, and then after you run through everybody, you start looking around the grid. Well, who are we going to go with next? And all 4 of us are looking at the same thing. All 4 of us had basically the same style. All 4 of us were good at amateur wrestling and knew a little bit about the shoot business. So we approached Eddie. Hey, Eddie, why don't you let us go with Mike? Well, no, I need both teams hot, and I can't afford to lose one of them. So we talked him into it, and we didn't talk him 100% into it like we did Crockett's. So we just got a little nip and bud type of angle down here with them, where we made the loop a couple of times and drew big houses, saw that the match could get over, and kind of put it back in the bank and went our separate ways again. So it was a fun. So I don't know. I want to name somebody because I got 3 opponents right there, and then that don't even include the Bob Roops, the Bob Orton Juniors, and the guys like that you're in the ring with.
Man, Jerry, we were watching the match you had with Danny Hodge from back in the day. It's on YouTube. Yeah. What a classic.
Wow. Yeah, that's one of my favorite matches to watch on YouTube too. And that just there's only one thing. You watch the introduction of that match, and it's great to watch the introduction. The great Gordon Soley out there, and Danny Hodge, blah blah blah, blah blah blah, and Gerald Brisco. It's kind of like, wow, what am I doing in the ring with this guy? But like I said, growing up, that was my goal, is to beat Danny Hodge, and I won the junior heavyweight championship, but I did get to win it from Hodge. So to me, it just okay. So you won it. You're supposed to win the damn thing, So, but it wasn't Danny Hodge.
Man, you mentioned Bob Roop, and we've got an interesting guest coming on Old School Shooters Tuesday. Jack and I are going to interview a fellow named Warren Harding. He's the only guy that ever survived the Sugar Hold Challenge with Bob Roop and escaped the Sugar Hold. He's a good grappler in his own right, and that's going to be something interesting. And that brings me kind of to this history, Jerry, because it's something that's also kind of lost in the world of professional wrestling. When I came down to South Carolina and moved down to South Carolina in 2007, I that was when I'd already met Pops, and I was doing grappling, MMA, and crossing over to pro wrestling. And this is a funny story. So I had a guy who I was training with in MMA that brought me to a fellow's promotion named Jerry Bragg in South Carolina. He was known as Chief J Eagle in pro wrestling. He has a APW out in the sticks outside of Spartanburg in Boiling Springs. And he wanted me to do this thing, and I did it a couple times on Wednesday nights. And this isn't even that long ago. What is that, 15 years ago? Wednesday nights. So you want to be a wrestler. And, of course, in the Deep South, they spelled it wrestler. Okay. And he would have guys come to
you're from Connecticut. You can't even say it's called wrestling. Wrestling. Let me say wrestling, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I got that. You know, we had Brody on last night. I don't know if Jack Kilby could understand us, because we got when I get a guy from New York on, it's, you know, I kind of go back to that old tongue. But yeah, so he used to do this. He used to do this gimmick. So you want to be a wrestler, and he had me do it, and another guy, Chuck Sloan, do it, and then a wrestler from that had wrestled for UNC that was a lighter weight guy that kind of had a drug problem, and he paid him in drugs. This shows you the seediness of pro wrestling. And it was basically like the guys would pay $80 and they'd see if they could last with us. And if they could last with us, he'd train them. And he just wanted us to, you know, cross face them, stretch them, and send them on their way. And I think that was one of the last bastions of that old school stuff. But that was what Eddie Graham did with Bob Roop. And that's kind of the history of pro wrestling. You hear The Undertaker, right? He goes on Joe Rogan's show, and he tells the story of him getting stretched, how he got stretched by Buzz Sawyer, and Buzz took his money and went on his way. That's pretty old school.
Yeah, that was old school, you know, and every promotion had to do that, because, you know, you're a local promotion. The rule down here in Florida, Eddie Graham didn't care if you went to a bar and you got in a fight, but the only thing he cared about if you won. If there is rule, if you go to a bar and get in a fight and you get your ass kicked, don't show up for work the next day, because you'll be gone. You won't be working for me anymore. And so you had to be very careful out there and there, you know. But Bob Roop, I was here in Florida. We had the old sportatorium they called the Snake Pit at the time, and it was Hero Matsuda, Bob, and Jack, myself, and Eddie Graham to beat them up afterwards. And but there's some wonderful, great videos of Bob Roop putting the sugar hold on guys, and you know, and them squealing, and so many stories. You know, Dwayne Johnson and $7 did a great series on Vice TV called Tales of the Territories, and they do the Florida territory. And it shows some Roop style in there. And it interviews Roop, and Roop gives him kind of in-depth type responses to the question, which I thought was fantastic. And anybody that knows Bob Roop knows he's one of the nicest, soft-spoken guys. He's a teacher, and that's how Bob is. But, you know, you get him in that wrestling ring, it's a different story. You're in there to take my living away from me, and you're not going to do it unless you're man enough to do it. And Bob just turned into that vicious animal that he is when the bell goes off or the whistle blows. It's a fascinating.
Yeah, and you know, that's the way that I was taught by Pops, by Billy Wicks. He told me, and he told Phil when Phil started getting into. You remember when Phil was getting into pro wrestling? Right, yeah. When Pops was still alive, and I shared this last night. This is what he told me. He said, look, and he told Kamal Shalarus this too, who was an international wrestler that had trained with us in grappling and MMA. When Kamal went into regional pro wrestling, he said, listen, you guys don't go into pro wrestling and degrade yourselves. You tell those people, there's not a damn thing I'm doing in that ring to my opponent that I can't do to every one of you fat slobs that pays to see me.
What a true statement there, and that's the old timer philosophy for sure back there. And that just goes to show you that's what Eddie Graham lived by, and and it's it gets personal too. You're out there, you're a professional, and you don't want to be embarrassed. So you better suck it up and give the best you can. Or there's some guys sitting third row will kick your ass if you don't, and then go all around town bragging about it. And how are you going to draw money from me if that happens? King and Jack, we all hit these spots in our life where we think we're the toughest man on earth, and we know one of the toughest men on earth. I'm going to tell you a fun story on when I'm leaving here today on this podcast. It concerned a good dear friend of all of us, the great late Billy Robinson. A guy that you didn't want to mess with. And a guy that, he loved to rib, but he didn't really like people ribbing him, and these people don't know what ribs are, they're jokes on each other. And Billy didn't want to be the butt of anybody's joke or he'd kick your ass. So, Billy and I, the great thing about it, when you got a little skill and you got guys that you like I said earlier, we kind of become friends. And Billy and I become really good friends. So I had a buddy that owned this big fishing boat. Over here in town and country area. So I said, hey, Billy, you want to go deep sea fishing with me? He said, yeah, we'll catch anything. I said, sure, we'll catch whatever you want to catch. So he comes out, and of course, my buddy, he got the ice chest loaded to the brim, and it's hot. And you know how it is down there in Florida, hot. We're drinking a little bit of vodka, Bloody Marys early in the morning. Then we switch over to the beers, and so we're pretty well out there. You get some of that false courage. So I don't know where in the hell I got this, but we're out fishing. We're catching great fish and everything. Billy, it's a big boat, about a 35, 45 footer, and it's got one of those diving platforms at the end of the boat. So we got our fish out on a line there, and I said, Billy, we're getting ready to go in, reel in the fish. He said, okay. So he goes out on this diver platform, and he's bending over, reeling in a damn fish, from the line that we caught that day. And so I'm sitting there, and like I said, I've had several adult beverages, probably a little too many. When you hear this story, you say a whole lot too many. So I see Billy Robinson, one of the toughest men in the world. Guy will kick my butt at the drop I had that don't like to be ribbed. And he'd not really like being out there in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico where you can't see land anyway. And we're talk about shark, we're talking about everything. So Billy's leaning over, he pulled in our bucket of fish. He leans over one more time, and I said, go for it, Brisco. You don't have one between your legs. So I kicked that Billy Robinson right in the ass. He goes, boom, he goes in. And about the time he hits the water, I kind of so Brisco, what the hell did you just do? You just kicked the baddest man in the world off of your boat in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. I turned around to the captain, I said, head, and I said, no, I can't, So Billy, we got Billy swimming towards the boat. Let me in, Sarge. I said, Billy, I'm gonna let you in if you promise me one thing. Anything, just let me in. I said, I'm gonna let you up here if you don't kick my ass when you get on this boat. You gotta swear to God and you promise me you won't do it. And he not saying nothing. He's mad. I said, Billy, you want up here before that shark gets you? Yeah, help me up now and then. He please help me up. I said, Billy, promise me that you won't kick my ass when you get up on it. I promise you, Brisco, I'll give him a rope up. And we get him back in there. He's looking at me without look in his eye. Man, Brisco, you got to be the dumbest son of a bitch in the world or the luckiest that's going to be in the world. That night I was the luckiest that's going to be in the world.
That's a great story. And I have a similar story to tell because I sent Jack got 2 shows in a row, MMA shows that I had called with American Psycho Stephan Bonner in South Carolina. And man, so I'm calling the fights with Bonner in South Carolina, and I'm pretty well known in South Carolina because I'd lived there for a while and trained some fighters and had a decent fight career. So Bonner's coming in to call the fights with me, right? And Bonner's a good friend, but Bonner loves his Jack Daniels, So all night, the night before, he's drinking Jack Daniels. We're drinking at the bar. We tore it up at the bar and broke some tables. And I ran away from him. And he literally got kicked out of the hotel, the Spartanburg Marriott. And Bonner, you look at TMZ, he's a wild man. They all know that. But he goes in the morning, he goes, take me to the damn liquor store. So we go to the liquor store and he's drinking Jack, and we got to do the pre-fight, the pre-show, right? So Matt Perkle, who was the cut man, who was a coach for Carolina Combat Club and coach for Elmwood High School out in South Carolina, he goes, I want you to see how you and Bonner go at it. And then some of the corners are like, yeah, we want to see you guys, it's just grappling, see who can get the better of who. Now, Bonner's been drinking Jack, so he's a little off his game, right? So I shot behind him and I ankle picked him and I got behind him and I spun around and I messed his hair up really bad. And that was the wrong thing to do. Because I tried to shoot a single on him. He hooked my arm. He threw me like double wrist lock, Comortho, and he wouldn't let go. And that entire show, my arm was like this. Like I thought he had broken my arm. He had actually been a bone bruise. So that's kind of a similar story to the one that Jerry has. Bonner is a beast, man. I mean, for a guy that had a Hall of Fame career in UFC as a light heavyweight, he walks around at 250 and he's 6'4". He's a monster. So yeah, I mean, maybe I could out wrestle him a little bit and Brisco, maybe outpoint him a little bit. But when it comes down to it, it's that's not the guy to play with.
No, sometimes that alcohol gets the best of us, or we think. One non-alcohol related deal. You mentioned the hair. That reminded me of a Jack story. And Jack with Terry Funk. Jack and I get Dory and Terry. Jack knew he was losing his hair. He had getting that Friar Tuck look in the back of his head there. So he hated guys going to his hair. I mean, that was one of Jack's rules. Hey, you do anything you want to, but don't pull my hair. So Terry Funk, that's like telling a 3-year-old not to eat on his Crayolas, and which Terry ate a lot of probably. So anyway, they're out in the match, and I'm watching it go along, and I'm watching Terry, and I see Terry go up towards Jack's hair, and I hear Jack, Terry, I told you not to pull my hair. And when they go along, here comes another spot. It comes on, Terry pulls his hair. Jack dropped the headlock or whatever hold he was in and turned around and started farmers carrying, hooking Terry, and Terry's going, Junior, help me. And Junior turned him, Terry, you got yourself into this mess. Get out. So Junior finally comes over towards me and tries to tag me. And so I hook him too. So Terry's running around in a circle going crazy like he usually does. But yeah, Terry learned right away, don't go against Jack.
How were the Funk brothers as far as shooting ability? Because their father was
he's 3-time state champion. They wanted to name a high school wrestling team after him up in Indiana or Illinois, Indiana, I believe it was. Yeah, high school was closing down, and they were going to rebuild a high school, and they wanted to build a Dory Funk Senior a wrestling room there, a gymnasium there, honor Dory's. He was quite a wrestler. Terry was probably the toughest of the two, because Terry had no fear of anything. Dory was more analytical guy of the two, and Dory wouldn't put himself in those positions to be challenged or to challenge anybody. Where Terry just didn't give a damn. He would go out there. It was great working with them because it was like night and day. Junior come in, you had your stuff that you're going to do, and you knew what you're going to do. Terry comes in and he was so unpredictable. You could sit in the back for an hour and a half, talk to him, and the pace of the match changed, and then Terry would change, and then there goes everything you planned. So Terry was just kind of ad lib. You just kind of follow Terry, and whereas Dory, you had what that set match that you had to do, but they were night and day in the ring, which really made them work though.
We've got
Yeah.
a whole whack of fan questions here that I'll try and sprinkle in. But one fan is asking, "Have you spoken to Mr. McMahon since his retirement?"
I
Vince.
sure did. A couple of times, matter of fact. One time, right during his birthday, I called him and wished him a happy birthday, and just asked him. And then he called me. My birthday is after his, and he called me on my birthday and talked to me for like 20, 30 minutes. And he was up in New York, and just relaxing as far as Vince McMahon could do. Of course, he had several business things he's still trying to complete. But yeah, I'd have talked to Vince at least 2 times.
Nice. Well, a true
And
legend, man. Really the man that made pro wrestling what it is today, going back years ago. Jerry, I got a crazy question for you, man. I just thought of it. So let's just say there was no Vince McMahon, right? And it was still the territory world. What do you think pro wrestling would look like now in 2022?
Well, I think it looked the same because of cable TV, and it would have been a battle of who had the strongest cable TV. And with the Superstation having the advantage of everybody, of course, it would be in Atlanta because that's where it was. It was if you go back and just really follow the territory during that time, all the territories were migrating towards Atlanta anyway, sending their stars down there. But what's that tell you? That TV was big everywhere because there was every major star from every NWA territory there was begging to get on that TV. So it would have been in the hands of the people who controlled Atlanta TV where the business would have gone. But I think it would have eventually been at the same place. It might not have been the progression speed or the warp speed that Vince put it to, but it would have been there. Because, Crockett, everybody was already running big shows. Crockett was running, Starrcade. Bill Watts was running down in New Orleans at the Superdome doing 40, 50,000 people in the Superdome. So, business was big, but it hit that spot where cable TV came in, and then the territories. That's when the territories really started to slow down a lot. Is when the cable TV came in, and it went into all the major territories. And it's always what's new is best. And all of a sudden you're up in Minnesota area and Waycross or La Crosse, Wisconsin, somewhere like that, watching Birds TV, and then all of a sudden all the glittered stars come on TBS, and it's wow, this is new, this is kind of cool. Then every once in a while you see one of your stars sprinkle in, which then gives it the perception that it's even bigger because they got your stars coming down being on their TV, and so the perception of the La Crosse, Wisconsin, or Waverly, Illinois fans, hey, this must be the best because our guys are going down there and getting on their TV. So I think business will probably ended up in the same position, but what style, who knows?
I think you may have answered this question, Jerry, but I wanted to ask you about the sale of you're being a part of the sale of the Georgia Championship Wrestling controlling interest to Vince in, I believe it was 84, and the Black Saturday, as it's called. Did you have any idea at the time that was such a momentous historical situation, or was it simply given it looked like a good business deal?
Well, number one, it was a good business deal, and number two, we felt, we being my brother and myself, that the business was going to go exactly what I just described to you a while ago, that business was going to be big nationwide. We had some guys, and I give the guys respect because of their loyalty to the NWA, that they did not want to step on their partners, their feet and go into their territory and run shows. Georgia expanded, if you remember, they expanded in Ohio, Michigan, and West Virginia. The reason we expanded in there was because that was the Sheik's territory, and it was dead. Sheik could burn it up, totally burn it up, left there owing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to TV stations, radio stations, and buildings. So we expanded into that area because there was no rightfully owner for it. But when we started, my brother and I started talking about going into other parts because we were given this ratings book each month by Turner Television, and it was showing when we first got it. It was a couple of pages thick. By the time I left there, the damn book was like 4 inches. That's how quick cable was growing. If you guys remember, cable wasn't everywhere at that time. It was just in the major cities before it got into the burgs and everything. So,
yeah, I'm old enough to remember we didn't have cable.
Yeah, and
when I was
a
growing
lot
up.
of people didn't want cable or didn't believe in cable. But we started to see getting those sheets and seeing the growth of cable into these particular. Hey, why don't we go to Denver? Why don't we go? Well, we can't go there and burn there. Why don't we go to Sanford? Well, we can't go there. Somebody Roy's there. So we saw that, but we knew what was going on, and we knew that that was Vince's gold, and we got the TV already. Why can't we do this? And we had partners that were loyal to their friends and didn't want to make the move. And we knew that if we stayed status quo, that Vince was going to put us all out of business. Did we know it was going to be the epic thing that it turned out to be? No, I'd be lying if I sat there and said, yeah, we knew exactly where we were going to go. But we knew the business would go nationally. I will say that much. We did see that coming. But did we think it would be, what it is today? No, I didn't.
So I've got to mention this. Jack Kilby runs a promotion called Great North Wrestling, which was originally Hannibal's promotion. And they've had, like, Hannibal's wrestled Dan Severn. I don't know if you know Hannibal's background, Jerry, but he was,
my son's worked with Hannibal up there several times in a couple of shoot matches up there.
So. Yeah, absolutely. And Hannibal, being a national champion in freestyle in Canada, and he wrestled my good friend Dan Severn. They had a classic match. So I'm doing something with these guys, and part of the reason why I'm co-hosting this with Jack, I know we have Jake Shannon scheduled to come on in February with you and Bradshaw that runs Shoot Pro Wrestling. Jake's got a long lineage in MMA and grappling with some of the top wrestling and grappling seminars and clinics in the country, with Wade Chalice and Dan Severn and Josh Barnett and you name it, Frank Shamrock. And I'm excited to be one half of the broadcasting team and business development manager for Shoot Pro Wrestling. We've had 3 shows, and our 4th show is actually going to be with Jack and with Great North Wrestling. And our matchmaker is Colin Crandall, who's host of MMA Power Hour, and he's got the UFC fighters that are on the UFC cards every week. So we're going to have active UFC fighters. We're going to have collegiate wrestlers competing in a 4-man tournament to crown our champion coming up in 2023 with Shoot Pro Wrestling on the Great North Wrestling show. And I'm excited to kind of announce that. It's going to be on their first show in the United States in upstate New York. And we'd love to have you on that in some capacity. I'd love to have you in the broadcast booth because you're the perfect guy. You're vast knowledge. But that's why I'm hosting this show with Jack, because we really want to merge. It's not even merging. It's really going back to the roots of professional wrestling, of what professional wrestling really is, with Shoot Pro Wrestling. Just did the commercial with Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonner, who are also part of our executive board, and we're excited about this promotion.
It sounds exciting as hell. I just became a friend with this young man who was a national champion at University of Oklahoma that bought the rights to Grappling USA. He's out in LA, and he's trying to revive Grappling USA. He's got the entire worldwide footage of all the world grappling events and like that. I mentioned Hannibal TV to him as a means of getting his show out there, and he's working with several Hollywood types to try to get it in the U.S. and on a national cable system there, but. I see a movement toward reviving the old school wrestling, which really makes me happy. And the more exposure that we all, guys like you, King, and Jack and myself, the more we can talk about it and get it out there. There's so many forms of the great sport that we love. I mean, from our folk style all to the old grappling, old hooker style, which is a very unique style, to the catch style. I mean, there's just a lot of different styles of wrestling that are great. Each one of them, once you learn the rules and regulation, I think that's where the governing bodies have got to get together and get a more unified form of scoring and decision making, so that people aren't so confused. There's good and bad, and you should have a clear winner. And why does this guy win when the other guy dominated the guy for 8 minutes or so? But I think once we educate the public and the people out there that every form of our sport can grow and grow big, because let's face it, there's not a lot of good things on TV. You give folks some good action, and they're going to tune in no matter what it's called. So I think if you see something local out there, from the local judo to the local professional wrestling group, go out and support them, because you never know who you're going to see, number one, and you never know what you're going to see and how it turns out. So support all those grassroots forms of wrestling.
Definitely.
Sorry, King, go ahead.
Definitely. And, I got to know Jerry in my shoot life as a capacity as a wrestling coach, and was able to send a young man down there to compete with NXT, and also a young man that I coached out of Dutch Fork High, Tim Dudley, that went on to a phenomenal career in Nebraska. And Jerry really did a tremendous service for the brand of World Wrestling Entertainment. We know it's a huge conglomerate. We know there's so many facets to it, but Jerry did a huge service to them in the old school realm, in that he recruited folks from amateur wrestling, and he dealt with coaches like myself. And that young man was Tim Dudley, TJ Dudley, who was a phenomenal athlete. And I want to thank Jerry. My phone is about to die soon here, but I want to thank Jerry for that tremendous service that he's done for the sport.
Well, I appreciate that. Tim, what a tremendous wrestler. I enjoyed watching him wrestling. Man, what great coaching he had. Coach Manning out there in Nebraska, of course, Jordan Burroughs and Green and those guys out there. What a dynasty they built in that middleweight out there in Nebraska. And Tim more than lived up to it. And what I was so pleased about was seeing somebody from South Carolina in that tournament. South Carolina, the southern states kind of get left out of those big tournaments because they don't have the background and the experience. But guys like Duggan come along, and that don't matter what state in, that kid was going to be a winner, man, and draw attention to the sport. And he drew attention to the sport because of his heart and his competitiveness, which he all got from the King there. He
absolutely
from the King.
Thank you, Jerry. And prior to that, one of the biggest wrestlers from South Carolina was Shelton Benjamin from Orangeburg,
which I recruited also. Yeah, Sheldon. I mean, not only wrestler, he was one of the greatest athletes to come out of South Carolina. I mean, Sheldon could do. He's probably the greatest athlete that WWE had ever signed. Guy could do anything, and he what a tremendous athlete, what a tremendous person he is too, and that's what really counts a lot. He was recommended by my old friend Jay Robinson, who was a national champion coach at Minnesota. And so
you talk about the best clinics going way back, the Jay Robinson clinics. Guys, I'm on like 1%. My phone's about to die. We
better wrap this baby up then.
Yeah.
It looks like there's going to have to be a part 2 if we're going to start talking about Jay Robinson.
Just before you go though, the fans are Jerry asking a lot about your situation, your angle during the Attitude Era as one of the Stooges, and I'd be remiss if I didn't interject that. In terms of was that obviously a highlight of your WWE career? And the fans are asking, how did that come about?
Well, that. When you're 55 years old, as I was at that time, and you got any chance at all to be on a global TV event and contribute in a good way and help build a product, it's a thrill to you. And Pat and I, we laughed. We worked all of our career to be legitimate wrestlers, to be respected in the dressing room. Hey, those guys could draw money. They were great at what they did. They were great wrestlers. And here we are being completely different in a comedic role, because I'm a goof off anyway, but Pat's a real serious guy. And it took me really some coaching to get Pat to play along. But once Pat just got that all that other stuff out of his head about, I'm not Pat Patterson 25 anymore. I'm Pat Patterson, the corporate guy now. So once he got that, Pat was as good as they come, man. And what a great guy to work with, and taught me so much up here thinking about how to put together a match. The guy was as good as they come in that. So it was a fun time. It was kind of, I had 2 kids in school. The hardest people it was on was my 2 kids taking the ribbon, especially when I had to wear a dress. And I said, just tell them when I went to the bank, they called me Mr. Brisco. So,
of course. So you had a 35-year plus career with Titan Sports, and just this is I know probably a difficult question, but if you could drill down to what was your career highlight, either in front of the camera, recruiting, or something else, what would that be?
Wow. I think coming in when we were in such a desperate time in the company, Vince had just gone through the steroid trial. We just had those allegations about the ring boys and all that stuff. The company was probably at a low point. And that's when I first moved into the office position that I moved into. So, just kind of working through that. And I just remember the hard work and the daily work. I mean, the hours and hours. And everybody, don't you mind working that hard? Did Vince McMahon make you work that hard? No, Vince McMahon didn't make you work that hard. Vince McMahon inspired you to work that hard because he was the one sitting right next to you, elbowing you when you're kind of nodding out to keep on going. And the work ethic that the man had, I know it sounds, but man, you know what? I was with him 35 years, and they were a great 35 years. But turning the company around and then watching it grow. Then when it went public, it was a thrill for all of us, old-time, long-term guys that had been there. It's something that you dream of as a kid getting into the business and getting with a company that's going to grow and just go to the stratosphere, and then being a part of the growth and seeing the growth of Stone Cold Steve Austin, seeing the growth of Shawn Michaels, seeing Bret Hart catch on, win the title, seeing Stone Cold Steve Austin come along, seeing the Undertaker, and you're being a part of all that stuff, and man, it's cliche as hell, but you're sitting there behind those curtains, and you hear that music hit from Monday Night Raw, or you're sitting there on the headphones, and the truck is counting you in 4, 3, 2, 1. All of a sudden, all hell breaks loose with all the pyro and the people and noise. If you don't get goosebumps, something's severely wrong with you. You don't belong in that position you're in if you're able to hear all that stuff. So, just the growth of the company and seeing it grow to what it's become, and the global enterprise. We always thought it would be big, but nobody except Vince figured it would be as big as it is now. Nobody.
Well, we're coming quickly to the end of our hour. I'm just going to, because again, we've had a number of fan questions. I'll just get 2 in if you can indulge us. The first one coming from Carl, who says, who did you think had better matches against the Road Warriors, you and your brother, or the Funks?
Oh, wow. I mean, I didn't see a lot of the Funk Brother Road Warriors match, but I saw a few of them in Atlanta and New Orleans and Jacksonville. But Funks and Road Warriors, they were a different style of match because we got something out of the Road Warriors that other people couldn't get out of them.
agree.
we made them slow down. We made them kind of tell a story in there instead of just coming out with Terry and Dory. They could just be mayhem, and Terry and Dory would do it. But with us, we would control the match a little bit different. Where there was actually a story to it, where we were obviously the smaller guys, so we would tell a story where we're trying to cripple their arm or try to take their leg out from them or take their neck out, take one of the main supports. We'd tell that story where we work on an arm, we'd have them taking arm drags, we'd have them taking different buffs, where other teams couldn't do that. But when it come time to sell them, the reason they liked working with Jack and I, nobody would sell them better than what Jack and I would sell them. So we let them do their extreme stuff and they let us do our extreme stuff. So there was a coordination of it, but I answering the question, I think our matches, because we gave them a little bit more than just brawling and fighting and a 10 count.
And the last fan question we could squeeze in the hour is a fan is asking about never before heard story of Gorilla Monsoon, please. The late great Gorilla Monsoon, Gino.
Oh, wow. Gino, go back to his, we should have had him in the shooting part of this story, because Gino was one of those guys that, man, he was a monster to begin with, but he was an NCAA champion, All-American at Ithaca College in New York. He knew how to go. But Gino, once he reached that where he was a backstage guy, he was also turned into a fantastic, marvelous teacher. And that was one of his assets. And he wanted to see Jack and I get along. And Jack and I had come from the South. We'd come up to the North and working tag team. And we were working the same system. We figured, hey, it got us over everywhere else, it'll get us over here. But the style was different up there. We were giving the guys too much, our opponents too much, going down and letting them false finishes, getting a 1-2 count on us. And Monsoon got us back after a match. He said, hey, the old man's counting a lot on you guys to draw some money. You're not going to get over letting those guys do that to you. At the most, give them one false finish. You guys are having to kick out from the bottom too many times. So he was always offering advice to my brother and I on how to get over New York style. And it worked, and he was right. So I always appreciate that from Dino.
Well, Jerry, I can't thank you enough for coming on Old School Shooters. We are very enlightened, and if there is ever an opportunity for a part 2, I didn't even get to ask you some of my fanboy questions about Georgia Championship Wrestling and Ole Anderson. So I feel like we're just scratching the surface. But in the meantime, where can you be found on social media? And I know you have a very successful podcast. Would you like to enlighten the Great North Wrestling fans, the Hannibal TV fans?
Oh, I sure will, because you guys got a massive audience out there. We're striving to become something like Hannibal TV and build our audience up to a level that you guys are on. But you can find us on any place you get your podcast. Spotify, Apple, all those forms of social media. It's Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. It's very unique. There's a lot of rumors about stories in there, so we just shoot right past the rumor and go right straight to the source. And with my connections, knowing everybody like JBL says, from Jim Londas to present time, we got numerous stories that we could go, and we could either add fact or fiction to the story, because we're getting the story from the guys who told the story, who lived the story. So they're genuine, good stories. We don't look for dirt. We're not a dirt producing podcast. We really run away from that, because there's so much negativity out there in the world. We just want you to laugh. We want you to have some good time. Most of all, we want you to learn a little bit about the history of the business, so you can appreciate this great business we all love that much more. So it's a lot of fun doing it, and of course I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok, and all those other forums. I'm an old dog, but I can learn some new tricks. I'm working each day to get them, to learn them. And thanks to the patience of everybody out there, I'm starting to catch on a little bit. What happened?
For another edition of the Old School Shooters podcast. And since King isn't here, I'll hit the tagline, and that is Silver Sages spreading wisdom for the younger ages. Bye-bye, everybody.